In a museum vault, there is an iron axe head forged in the year 1200, 800 years old. Pick it up, examine the blade. The surface shows a dark patina, but the metal underneath? Solid, strong, no deep pitting, no structural decay. Now walk outside to your garden shed. There is a steel axe you bought 2 years ago. The head is already spotted with orange rust. In 5 years it will be so corroded you will throw it away. How is this possible? How can something made with primitive tools in a clay furnace outlast precision-engineered modern steel by centuries? The answer is not magic. It is chemistry, accident, and a lost understanding of iron that we sacrificed for convenience. Before we dive into this forgotten science, type "built to last" in the comments if you believe we have lost something valuable in our race for cheap, disposable tools. I want to know, does this resonate with you? Drop that comment now. Section 1. The Modern Rust Problem. To understand why medieval iron resisted rust, we must first understand what modern steel really is. When you buy a tool today, you are getting what metallurgists call mild steel. It contains roughly 0.25% carbon, 0 slag, 0 phosphorus. We call this progress. Medieval wrought iron was fundamentally different. It contained only 0.05% carbon, but up to 2% slag, those glassy impurities left over from smelting. It also contained phosphorus, sometimes as much as 0.25%, an element that came naturally from the ore. Modern steel production deliberately removes both the slag and the phosphorus. Why? Because they make the steel harder to work with in factory processes. Slag-free steel can be rolled into sheets faster. Phosphorus-free steel welds more easily in assembly lines. We optimized for manufacturing speed, not for durability. But here is what we did not understand until recently. Those impurities were not bugs. They were features. When modern steel rusts, the corrosion digs straight down. A speck of moisture touches the surface. Oxygen reacts with iron. Rust forms. That rust is porous, and it traps more moisture, which creates more rust. The corrosion burrows deeper, following the grain boundaries of the metal like roots following cracks in concrete. A microscopic crack in modern steel becomes a highway for rust. Nothing stops it. Within months, surface rust becomes structural damage. Medieval wrought iron had a secret weapon, slag stringers. During the forging process, as the blacksmith hammered the bloom of iron, tiny threads of glassy slag were stretched throughout the metal. Under a microscope, it looks like wood grain, thousands of microscopic glass fibers running through the iron matrix. When rust started on wrought iron, it would hit one of these slag barriers. The glass fiber would blunt the corrosion, forcing it to spread sideways instead of penetrating deep. The result? An axe head that forms a protective patina and stops corroding instead of crumbling into orange powder. If you are learning something valuable here, hit that like button. It costs you nothing, but it helps this knowledge reach people who need to hear it. Quick tap, then we continue. Section 2. The accidental genius of phosphorus. Medieval smiths did not understand chemistry. They did not know what phosphorus was, but they knew which rocks made the best iron. In marshy areas across Europe, iron ore formed naturally in bogs. This bog iron ore was easy to gather. You could practically rake it off the ground, but it had something special, high phosphorus content. When bog iron was smelted, that phosphorus stayed in the metal, and when that phosphorus-rich iron slowly corroded over decades, something remarkable happened. The phosphorus helped form a dense, stable film of protective oxides on the surface. This film sealed the metal from moisture and oxygen, dramatically slowing further rust. This was a happy accident, a beneficial impurity in the ore. The smiths did not know why bog iron worked better, they just knew it did. The most spectacular example of this effect stands in Delhi, India. The Iron Pillar of Delhi is over 1,600 years old. It weighs more than 6 tons, and it has almost no rust. For decades, scientists were baffled. How could iron survive that long? Modern metallurgical analysis revealed the answer. The pillar was forged from iron containing high phosphorus content. As it slowly oxidized over centuries, a thin layer of crystalline iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate formed at the metal oxide interface. This layer is incredibly stable and non-porous. It functions like a ceramic coating. Moisture cannot penetrate it. The pillar stopped rusting after forming this protective skin. Medieval European smiths were creating the same effect on a smaller scale, every time they forged a tool from phosphorus-rich bog iron. Modern steel? We mine deep underground for pure iron ore. Then we deliberately remove phosphorus in the refining process. We traded rust resistance for easier manufacturing. But the phosphorus advantage was not unique to European bogs. Across the medieval world, certain regions became legendary for their iron, not because of superior skill alone, but because the earth itself was different there. In Toledo, Spain, medieval smiths produced blades so renowned that knights travelled across Europe to acquire them. The secret was in the ore. The iron deposits around Toledo naturally contain traces of nickel and chromium. These elements, which we deliberately add to modern stainless steel, were accidents of geology. Toledo steel resisted corrosion better than iron from other regions because the mountain itself was alloyed. In southern India, smiths produced wootz steel, what Europeans called Damascus steel. Modern analysis has revealed something extraordinary in these ancient blades. They contain carbon nanotubes, structures so advanced that material scientists did not discover them until the 1990s. The medieval smiths did not know they were creating nanotechnology. The slow cooling of their crucible process, combined with trace elements in the ore, accidentally assembled these molecular structures. Medieval trade routes carried blooms of high-quality iron across continents. A smith in England might pay a month's wages for a bloom of Swedish iron, known for its purity and workability. Arabian merchants transported Indian wootz cakes to Damascus, where they were forged into legendary blades. The principle was universal. Beneficial impurities from local geology, combined with processes that preserved rather than removed them, created materials with properties we struggle to replicate today. We are not smarter than medieval smiths. We simply chose to optimize for different goals. Section 3. The Bloomery advantage. The technology that created this superior iron was brutally simple. The Bloomery furnace was a chimney of clay and stone, standing only as tall as a person. Inside, layers of charcoal and iron ore were stacked together. Bellows forced air through pipes at the base. The key was temperature control, or rather, the lack of it. A bloomery operated at roughly 1,200 degrees Celsius, hot enough to chemically reduce the ore, but crucially, not hot enough to melt the iron. Iron melts at 1,538 degrees Celsius. The bloomery never reached that threshold. What happened instead was a slow, dirty process. As the charcoal burned, it produced carbon monoxide gas. This gas pulled oxygen away from the iron ore, leaving behind particles of pure metallic iron. But all the rocky impurities in the ore, the silica and other minerals, those did melt. They formed a glassy slag that dripped down through the furnace. The solid iron particles sank into this molten slag bath, clumping together at the bottom into a spongy mass called a bloom. After hours of work, the smith would crack open the furnace and pull out this incandescent blob. It looked more like volcanic rock than metal. Here is where the magic happened. As the iron particles were forming, surrounded by burning charcoal for hours, they absorbed carbon unevenly. Some areas absorbed very little, staying as soft wrought iron. Other areas absorbed more, accidentally becoming steel. And all throughout this mess were threads of that protective slag. Modern steel is cold-rolled. Bars of steel are pressed through rollers at room temperature, shaping them quickly and efficiently. Medieval smiths did not have that option. They had to work their iron hot. The bloom was reheated in the forge and hammered over and over. This hot working did something crucial. It drove out some of the slag, yes, but it also compressed and aligned the slag that remained, stretching it into those microscopic fiber networks. Every hammer blow welded the iron particles together more tightly. Every reheating allowed carbon to redistribute. The constant working eliminated internal stresses and micro cracks. The smith was not just shaping the metal, he was fundamentally improving its internal structure with every strike. This took time. A single axe head might require 3 days of repeated heating and hammering. A modern factory stamps out the same shape in 3 minutes. We chose speed. They achieved permanence. Section 3.5. The economics of permanence. To understand why medieval iron resisted rust so well, we must understand what that iron represented. It was not simply a material. It was concentrated time, skill, and value. Those 3 days to forge a single axe head. That was 3 days of a master craftsman's labour. In medieval England, a quality axe might cost the equivalent of a labourer's wages for an entire month. A sword could represent 6 months of income. These were not purchases. They were investments meant to last a lifetime and then be passed down. This created an economic reality we have completely lost. When your grandfather's hammer cost as much as a month's food for your family, you did not throw it away because of surface rust. You maintained it, you oiled it, you stored it properly. Tools that expensive were listed in wills, fought over in inheritance disputes, and marked with the owner's symbol. Medieval blacksmiths trained for 7 years as apprentices before they could call themselves journeymen. Another 7 years might pass before a smith earned the title of master and permission to open their own forge. This was not romantic tradition. It was economic necessity. A poorly made tool that failed could kill someone. A plough that broke during planting season could mean starvation. The medieval guild system enforced this quality through brutal simplicity. If your work failed, you were expelled from the guild. No guild membership meant no legal right to sell your work. The guild's reputation was worth more than any individual smith, so quality was not optional. We look at medieval iron's rust resistance and think it was about superior technique. But technique alone means nothing without economic pressure to maintain standards. They made iron that lasted because making iron that failed was financial suicide. Today, a hardware store axe costs $15. If it rusts out in 2 years, you buy another one. The manufacturer is not punished. There is no guild to expel them. The economic incentive has inverted completely. Planned obsolescence is not a conspiracy. It is simply more profitable than permanence. Section 4. The maintenance magic we forgot. Medieval smiths understood something else we have forgotten. Fresh iron needs treatment. After forging a tool to final shape, the smith would perform a process we might call seasoning, though they did not use that word. The finished piece would be heated until it glowed dull red, then rubbed with linseed oil or animal fat while still hot. The heat caused the oil to polymerize, forming a hard, thin coating bonded to the metal surface. This coating was not paint. It was a molecular layer that sealed the iron from moisture and oxygen. You season a cast iron pan the same way today. But modern steel tools, they come with nothing. Maybe a thin coat of machine oil that washes off the first time it rains. No one teaches you to season your tools because modern steel is disposable by design. Medieval iron that was used regularly developed another advantage. A dark, stable patina would form on the surface. This was not rust in the destructive sense. It was magnetite, a form of iron oxide that is dense and protective. Frequent use kept this patina intact. The oil from human hands, the friction of work, the regular exposure to air without prolonged moisture, all of this maintained a protective surface layer. Tools that were stored dry and used often could last for generations. The grandson would inherit his grandfather's hammer, the iron still sound. We abandoned these practices not because they did not work, but because they required care. Modern tools are designed to be replaced, not maintained. You might ask, if medieval iron was so superior in rust resistance, why do we not make it that way now? The answer is economics, not ignorance. A Bloomery furnace produces perhaps 50 pounds of iron per day. A modern blast furnace produces thousands of tons. The difference is not just scale, it is control. In a blast furnace, temperatures exceed 1,500 degrees Celsius. Iron melts completely. Slag is skimmed off as liquid waste. The result is molten pig iron with high carbon content that must be refined into steel in a separate process. Fast, efficient, and consistent. But that consistency comes at a cost. You cannot control the microscopic distribution of slag stringers in liquid metal. You cannot accidentally preserve beneficial phosphorus while removing harmful sulfur. The Bloomery process was slow precisely because it operated at the edge of iron's transformation, in that narrow temperature range where solid-state chemistry could work its magic. We traded that magic for the ability to make 1 billion fence posts per year. Most will rust away in a decade, but they are cheap. Section 5. The composite blade secret. The Bloomery gave medieval smiths a chaotic mix of materials in every bloom: soft-wrought iron, Harder steel, protective slag. A lesser craftsman might see this as a problem. A master saw it as an opportunity. The smith could read the metal. By striking a piece against a grinding wheel and watching the sparks, he could identify carbon content. Soft iron throws long, lazy orange sparks. High carbon steel erupts in brilliant white bursts. Using this sensory knowledge, the smith would sort the bloom. High carbon pieces were precious. They would form the cutting edge. The softer wrought iron, tough and shock absorbent, would form the body and spine of a blade. These pieces were forge welded together, heated to white-hot temperature. Their surfaces would begin to liquefy. A few hammer blows, and they fused permanently into one. The result was a blade with a hard edge that held sharpness, supported by a flexible core that absorbed impacts without shattering. This composite structure, hard edge and tough body, was not a single material trying to be two things. It was two materials, each doing what it did best. Some smiths took this further, creating pattern-welded blades where bars of iron and steel were twisted together before forging. The result showed a water-like pattern on the surface, beautiful and functional. But here is what matters for rust resistance. Those forge welds created more interfaces, more boundaries where slag stringers could form protective networks. A pattern-welded blade was not just strong, it was armored against corrosion from the inside out. Section 6. The science behind the sorcery. Medieval alchemy that actually worked. If you read medieval blacksmithing texts, you will find recipes that sound like witchcraft. Theophilus, a 12th century German monk, wrote in 1125 that tools are given a harder tempering in the urine of a small red-headed boy than in ordinary water. Other medieval manuscripts prescribed even stranger concoctions. One recipe called for 1 part white radish, 1 part horseradish, 1 part earthworm larvae, and 1 part buck's blood when the buck is in rut. Another recommended clarified honey, fresh urine of a he-goat, alum, borax, olive oil and salt mixed together as the perfect quenching liquid. For centuries, historians dismissed these as superstition, folklore, the mystical thinking of people who did not understand chemistry. Then modern metallurgists decided to test them. The results were surprising. Most of the exotic quenchants did not work. Blood, despite its legendary status in sword-making lore, cooled steel far too slowly to harden it properly. Milk was equally useless. The romantic image of a blade quenched in the blood of enemies, pure fantasy. But two liquids worked remarkably well, water and urine. Why urine? The answer is prosaic chemistry hiding behind mystical language. Urine contains urea, which breaks down into ammonia and carbon dioxide. But more importantly, it contains salt, sodium chloride, potassium and other mineral salts. When you plunge red-hot steel into pure water, something problematic happens. A layer of steam forms instantly around the metal. This steam envelope acts as insulation, slowing the cooling rate. If the steel cools too slowly, it will not harden properly. Salt solves this problem. The particulates in salted water or in urine disrupt the steam layer before it can fully form. The liquid maintains direct contact with the hot metal. Cooling happens faster. Hardening succeeds. Medieval smiths discovered this through trial and error. They did not know about steam envelopes or nucleate boiling. They just knew that quenching in urine or in brine produced harder tools than pure water. So they wrapped that practical knowledge in mystical language. The urine of a red-headed boy was probably just memorable phrasing for add salt to your quench. The elaborate recipes with honey, herbs and animal parts, those added organic compounds and minerals that further disrupted steam formation. The smiths were conducting material science experiments, one quench at a time, recording what worked without understanding why. After hardening steel in a quench, medieval smiths performed another critical step, tempering. They would gently reheat the blade and watch colours spread across the polished surface. Pale straw yellow, deep bronze, peacock blue, purple. These colours were not decoration. They were an exquisitely precise temperature gauge, caused by the thickness of oxide layers forming on the steel surface. Each colour corresponded to a specific temperature, and each temperature produced different material properties. Straw yellow, around 230 degrees Celsius, made steel perfect for cutting edges. Bronze, around 255 degrees, was ideal for springs and swords that needed flexibility. Blue, around 300 degrees, created tools that could absorb impacts without shattering. The smith would heat the blade until the desired color appeared, then immediately quench it again to lock in that exact microstructure. He was manipulating crystalline transformations in steel using nothing but his eyes and experience. We still use color tempering today, but medieval smiths developed this technique not through understanding, but through patient observation. They noticed that a blade heated to bronze color survived battle better than one heated to blue color, so they codified that knowledge in guild secrets and master-apprentice relationships. The mystical language protected valuable trade secrets. But behind every invocation of the four elements, or the proper phase of the moon, was real, tested, repeatable science. We just needed 3 more centuries of chemistry to understand what they already knew how to do. The heart of the failure was the secret. Medieval iron was not perfect. It was not pure. It was not consistent. By every modern metallurgical standard, it was inferior material. And yet, a knife forged in the year 1300 can still cut. An axe from 1150 can still split wood, not despite their imperfections, but because of them. The slag that modern refineries throw away as waste was microscopic armor. The phosphorus that modern processes remove as contamination was a rust inhibitor. The slow, labor-intensive Bloomery process created an internal structure that liquid metal blast furnaces cannot replicate. We did not lose this knowledge through some dark age catastrophe. We abandoned it deliberately. We chose quantity over longevity, convenience over quality, cheap over lasting. The genius of the medieval blacksmith was not in overcoming imperfection. It was in understanding that imperfection, when properly controlled, could be strength. Those primitive smiths, standing before their clay furnaces, knew something profound. They knew how to read the soul of iron. They knew which rocks to gather from the marsh. They knew that patient, repeated heating and hammering created something no factory can mass produce. They built tools meant to outlive the builder. We build tools meant to be replaced. That is not progress. That is a choice. And every rusted fence post, every corroded garden tool, every hardware store axe that lasts 2 seasons is a reminder of what we chose. If this opened your eyes to how much we have lost in the name of cheap manufacturing, make sure you are subscribed. We are digging up more forgotten technology that puts modern solutions to shame. Hit that like button if you want to see us tackle more topics like this. What other ancient technology deserves a closer look? Drop your suggestions in the comments. And remember, every time you buy a tool, you are voting with your money. Buy once, cry once, or buy cheap, buy twice, and fill landfills with rust. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching.